Welcome to Winning, the podcast that gets under the skin of high performance across law, business, sport and the arts. I'm Ian Rosenblatt, founder of Rosenblatt Law. I'm a music lover and entrepreneur, and I'm also your host. This is the very first episode of Winning, where we will explore what it really means to succeed at the highest level. Through candid conversations with extraordinary individuals, we'll uncover the mindset, resilience, and moments that define a winning life, whether on the pitch, in the boardroom, or on the stage. And there's no better place to start than with today's guest, Steve Parish, co-owner and chairman of Crystal Palace Football Club. From building a global production company to rescuing Palace from liquidation in 2010, Steve's journey to football has been anything but typical. Under his leadership, the club reached the Premier League in 2013 and has stayed there ever since. Last season, his vision was rewarded with Palace's first major trophy, beating Manchester City 1-0 in the FA Cup final, before beating Premier League champions Liverpool to win the Community Shield. Welcome to Winning. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
How are you?
I've known you a long time.
Long time.
Do you know how long I've known you?
Tell me.
How much younger than your sister are you?
6 years.
So I've known you since you were 12.
Yes.
I remember you when you were 12.
Really?
I do.
Who are you?
Coming to your house, your parents' house,
Wow.
for tea. And you running around being...
Steve.
You haven't changed much,
No.
really. Apart from the hair. So, tell me a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about your background. I mean, I know, but it's interesting because you are now, obviously, a very successful entrepreneur, businessman. But you didn't come from that background at all, did you?
No, but I don't know what coming from that background is. What do you mean by that? Like, as in...
Your family background.
Family background. No, my dad
Parents...
was a trade union leader. Fought the Wapping dispute in...
Correct.
In the, 80s, was it?
Yeah, well, when you were 12, that was all going on.
Yes.
Because that was at that time that I met your parents.
I remember going to the big day where the big protests were, and it was terrifying. It was kind of a big standoff.
Were you conscious when you were growing up of being part of, were you a political family?
I don't think you could not be then.
Right.
You know, miners' strikes and Margaret Thatcher and all that kind of stuff, Falklands War. I did politics at A-level as well, so not when I was 12, but certainly it was a topic of conversation.
Was it actively all around the table, as it were, at home?
I think so, yeah, because if you've got a father that's involved in politics, basically, and employment and all of the kind of zeitgeist subjects at the time, I think it's hard for it not to permeate you as a 12-year-old in any way.
Well, and as you grew up, and while you were still at home, presumably, as well.
Yes. Yeah, my sister was always interested, and as you know, she studied law with you, and so it was a politically interested household.
Right, but your father's point of view, was that something that was it imposed on you? Was it you have to see to his children, his family, you have to see the world this way, or was he very open-minded about it?
No, he was very open-minded. I mean, on one level, you know, his trade union was kind of quite highly skilled workers and
print
workers. Yeah, but they were the people that set the type in hot metal. You know, they were they not being disrespectful to anybody else that worked in print. It was all very skillful, but it was a craft then. You know, there was a lot to it. It was difficult to do, and on one level, you know, it was like a professional body, right? They were representing the people that work for them, and they were extremely successful at getting the people that work for them, you know, incredibly well-paid jobs. So
was it a class thing at home? Was it, you know, we are working class or middle class?
No, because I think we were, you know, we lived quite a middle class.
Yeah,
I suppose I started to think about some of those paradoxes as I grew up. But the whole point was, what did Karl Marx say on the train when he was caught in first class? And they said, "Oh, you're in first class, you know, aren't you a communist?" And he said, "Well, that's the point of communism. So everybody travels in first class." So I think, you know, my take on it was from when my father went into employment if you go back, I suppose, the turn of the century, the balance between workers being exploited and now was hugely different. I mean, workers were very much exploited. They had no safety net. There was no welfare state. They could be sacked at will. There was no unfair dismissal. So he came into the post-war labour market when, it was still very difficult to be treated fairly, I guess. It was down to the largesse of the employer, wasn't it, as to whether you were treated fairly. And they stood up for the rights of the people that worked there, and in the print industry they probably became too successful at it, really. And then the whole thing imploded because, unfortunately, it's human nature, isn't it? People ask for more and more and more and more and more when they're still getting what they can get. And as you know, then people that own newspapers, I don't know what their motives were, but it wasn't entirely for profit, was it? It was to get their messages out there, influencers. It probably still is, media outlets. And it was difficult to produce these things, and they continued to produce them in very difficult conditions in Fleet Street, to a tight deadline. So it was very easy to upend that process and stop a paper from going out. So the unions ended up with this kind of huge power, which of course was then broken by Wapping. I mean, if you're asking me, what I think my dad did a lot of incredible stuff for people at work, as did the whole of the union movement. I don't think we would be there without that pressure, and in a relatively good place, for people that are employed and lots of very important rights. But I also think Wapping was an important moment for the country, probably for the reasons that he wouldn't have thought at the time.
Sure.
We had to get the balance right between driving an economy forward and embracing new technology, which was what that was all about, really. It was about the point where the unions were really trying to hold back the inevitable. This technology was going to happen. And so it's an interesting dynamic to grow up in.
Yes.
And my father was very pragmatic. He was very friendly with all of the, most of the bosses of the proprietors, of these places, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think he prided himself on getting things done, getting an outcome, getting a good conclusion for the employer and for the guys. But in the end, you were there or girls, you were there to do what you were told to do. He told a great story once about a dispute at News International. News International wanted them to pay everybody monthly from paying weekly. In that industry, everybody was paid weekly. When I went into it, we were paid weekly, which was obviously fantastic. If you go to work first week, you got your pay, whereas most jobs you go and you have to wait a month. So they wanted to change it because of the administrative nightmare with overtime and all the rest of it. So they asked him, would you go and see the lads and ladies and ask them if they'd go to monthly pay. He went down and he asked them, and of course they all said, no, there's no chance, we're not doing that. But after saying they split the difference 2 weeks, in the end they said, look, this is worth so much to us, we'll just give you a month up front. We'll give everybody a month up front and then we'll unravel it at the end. But so conditioned was everybody to just not agreeing with it that he went down on the shop floor and then, no, there's absolutely no chance, none whatsoever. And then one guy called Brian Ashdown, because he came to work for me, bizarrely, was slightly more financially literate maybe than some of the others, put his hand up and said, I think I've got a solution. So I said, oh, Brian, what's your solution? He said, if the company would like to pay me everybody's wages at the beginning of the month, I'll pay them all weekly.
Great idea.
Great idea.
Brilliant.
And then why would you? Because I make money. Do you want to make money out of having the money? What's the matter with you?
Brilliant.
So it was very difficult to get things done, even in the dispute. I remember, it was difficult to get them to agree to anything, other than the utopia as they saw it that they'd enjoyed.
Sure. But you said that you made a reference when you were speaking about when you went into the industry. How did you go? What part of the industry did you go into, and when?
I went into a computer graphics company. Well, it was becoming a computer graphics company. Up until then, it'd been a high-end retouching business, basically.
Right.
And it was creating images for advertising agencies. Obviously, I'd met people through my dad. I got into university, decided I didn't want to go, wanted to go into work. I was putting up full ceilings at the time. Right. I was earning quite a lot of money putting up full ceilings. The hardest work I've ever done. We would go to factories that were closed at night and put scaffolding up. And I mean, there was nothing of me as well. I don't know how I managed to do it. Never been so exhausted as after a night doing that. So I was doing that for quite a long time and making quite a lot of money. So I wanted to go into employment, and I fell into this job. I spent 4 months not understanding what they did. They were walking around with pieces of film that were all black and white, calling them the blue and the yellow and the red, and I had no idea. But gradually, I worked it out, and I had a piece of incredible good fortune in that at my school, they had one of the first computers, had an Apple II computer in a broom cupboard. And I did a computer studies OA level course, and literally made me the one-eyed man in the land of the blind in this place. It was all a craft up until that point, and there were these computers in the corner that had just been acquired by the company.
Yeah.
And they were looking at them like they were things from Mars, and they were just going to take their jobs, and that you don't want anything to do with it. Obviously, I found them fascinating. You know, I did this computer studies OA level course, so I knew a little bit, and that was it really. I fell into it, and I loved it. I had an aptitude for it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a moment in time, and
but did you see then? So how old were you then?
18.
18. So did you see yourself at 18 as going into a job that you were gonna, or you turned out you really liked, you enjoyed doing something that was exciting, motivating, and getting paid for it? And did you see your horizon as being kind of progression in that through that company, or were you always ambitious to have or be more, to be bigger, to grow?
I mean, I always worked. So from 14, you know, I was dropped off outside a cafe and told I was going into work on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And all of the jobs I'd done were hard, but they all had customer service. You know, you were kind of front, or ended up being front of house. So I always got some enjoyment out of work.
Yeah.
And when I went to work in Millets selling jeans and cabin equipment on a Saturday,
Yeah.
you know, I would give myself. If you sold the most, you could go early. You know, there would always be some kind of incentive. But generally, I thought of work as a place you went to make money to go to the pub with.
Right.
That's really what, you know, to enjoy your life. You know,
Okay.
that was what I thought.
So it was a means to an end.
Means to an end. I had no career plan or path. I was very much living from day to day. But I had, you know, all of those things, role model things. You know, my dad worked hard. My sister worked incredibly hard, as you know, at university. My mum worked hard bringing up the family. So I had good role models, you know. And as I say, from 14, I don't think you're even allowed now, are you? But from 14, I was dropped off, and every summer I worked there, and it was backbreakingly hard. So to find a job where I actually enjoyed the work, I'd enjoyed work when I was interacting with customers, but to actually enjoy just the process of doing the work and creating an outcome, a beautiful image or an ad for somebody, or getting somebody to say, oh, you know, great, you did a good job. That kind of enjoyment came to me then. And then I guess I've always been slightly anti-authoritarian. Like I say, I like to learn, but I don't like to be taught. So I'm very much self-taught on things. But there were some brilliant people. Back then, you know, you did an apprenticeship, and they really cared about you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they felt that it was part of their life's work, not their job, part of their life's work, irrespective of the company, because sometimes they were steeped in unions and they had kind of a bit of a disdain for the bosses. But you as a microcosm of staff in the company were a different thing, and you were there to help each other. You'd been helped.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, there was the abuse. You know, there was still the banging out and all that stuff, which I've told them, and no, on certain terms, wasn't happening to me. You know, there was just draconian, covering people in ink and they're naked and tying them to lampposts. I mean, it was still going on. You know, it was then. It wouldn't now. I mean, it's actually genuinely dangerous. I mean, they're smothering you in these chemicals. And
is that like a rite of passage, or was it? Is that just part of, you know, it's the public school equivalent of having your...
Yeah, the abused become the abusers, don't they? You know, I mean, people get it done to them, and for some reason they think...
So from that point of view, if you hadn't got your kind of personality, you'd have been very much terrified, I would have thought.
Well, you're on the cusp of it. I mean, I remember a chap coming to and threw me up against the wall because I hadn't made his tea in time, you know, and one of the other guys coming out. I mean, I was up for it anyway. I mean, even I was from South London, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't a fighter, but you knew that you have to stand up to people, whether you know, whether you like it or not. The best way is to stand up to them. So I think that there was a kind of split at that time, but they were still, I remember used to clean the sink out because there were computers, but there were also the chemical ways of doing things. This awful etch stuff and hypo, they called it, hydrochloric, whatever it was. I mean, it stank and it was really genuinely bad for you. Now, at that point, you know, you had to wear the gloves and things. Remember, probably 10 years before, people weren't even taking those kind of precautions. And I'd come in early to clean the sink, and they talk about, oh, if you do that, we'll throw you in the sink. And they were still, it was going on, And there was just a couple of moments. I just said, listen, guys, if you try and throw me in the sink, I'm going to punch you. Like, I'm not going to go in the sink.
Yeah, no, quite.
It's not going to happen, right? So let's just clear that up. And if that means I lose the job, I don't care. I know what goes on in this world. So it was all changing.
In their mind, was that a way of disciplining you to be better at your job, or was it just pure bullying?
I don't know. Some people think that stuff's funny, don't they? I don't know what people think when they do things like that. I've never been somebody. I don't like practical jokes. I don't really find slapstick comedy particularly funny. I mean, it just wasn't for me on any level. And luckily for me, it was all changing. I guess maybe 15 years before, maybe it just 10 years before, it might have just happened to you. They still, my apprentices that were with me, 2 of them were still banged out some years after this.
Oh, really?
Still going on.
So you've talked a bit about that. So it's obviously quite a strong memory. I mean, do you think, was that informative in any way in terms of...
I've never spoken about it before.
Oh, you know,
this format. So you've got it out of me.
Do you want to lie on the couch? But I'm just interested, I'm just interested in how people's psychology develops. And this, I don't want to get into a deep conversation about nature or nurture, but how, with the background that you've got, with the attitude that you had, and it sounds like you were just like a regular 18-year-old who, as you said, thought that earning money was what you needed to do to go and then enjoy yourself in the pub. No kind of big ambition. But there must have been, how did you sort of go from that kind of experience, going to the pub, getting your wages, to realizing that there could be much more, you had the ability or the ambition, drive, enthusiasm, whatever, to be bigger than that?
So I think if you take a step back, I mean, my household had quite a lot of conflict. So my father was in conflict most of the time, work-wise. Domestically, houses were pretty different in those days. Sure. There was quite a lot of shouting. In my house. And, and it was all, the next door neighbour was much worse. So we thought we were fairly normal. I remember the next door neighbour were 2 doctors, and the lady used to scream so loud at her kids that we would be terrified outside. There was an Alsatian that terrorised us and pinned us up against the wall. I mean, it was a little bit more horrendous. I mean, there are different risks, aren't there? But it was a little bit looser, in those days. So there was quite a lot of conflict. Going back to that, why did I tell them they weren't throwing me in the sink? My mum, who we lost this year, sadly, 90 years old. I mean, everything in my mum's life is conflict. I don't know whether it was, she was evacuated in the war, but there's not a thing she bought from a shop that she didn't take back. There's not a restaurant bill she was ever given that they weren't trying to rip her off. So everything was questioned. Yeah. Every single thing as I was growing up, there was nothing that was ever taken at face value. Sure. And I think that was a kind of an important moment. And that, answering your question, I don't know what I wanted to do, but I had a visceral reaction to things I didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. And I've said it quite a lot. I think that sometimes, life's a bit of a pinball game, isn't it? The ball goes in a slot and you just sit there because you think that's what you're meant to do, and you're told that's what you're meant to do, and you want to keep your parents happy, and you're not prepared to stand up for yourself in any way and say what you really want or what you think. And a lot of people end up doing something they don't really want to do. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there is something amazing out there for them to do, but they haven't tried very much in order to see that. Whereas I was different in that regard. And I think it's because of this environment of questioning and conflict and contrarianism in some ways that I found something that I love to do. Because if I hadn't have loved to do it, I'd have stopped doing it. I'm going to do something else. And I don't think many people do that.
But you would love to do, meaning the working in computer graphics.
Yes.
Yeah, but how do you go from loving computer graphics to wanting to own a computer graphics company, for example? How do you go from what
I think then
switch in your head?
I mean, going back to that, I think people far more had a preordained view of what their life would be. Right. So once again, if you're somebody that thinks is this being done the right way? Should I be doing this? Why aren't you doing it that way? If you're somebody that thinks like that, in those days, you were much more unusual, I think, than you are now, where everybody on social media is told that they're special and they think differently. And, and everybody wants to be different and everybody wants to have their own business. Then I think if you just happen to think like that, you tended to lead because people much more wanted to be led. There was much more resistance then to people leading. So I think that's, as I got into it, I thought I knew a better way of doing it or a better process, so it wasn't necessarily about, like I think it is now, having a business and making money. It was about just doing things the way I wanted to do them, how I wanted it done, having a vision.
So it was a control thing more than anything else.
Probably, yeah, probably. And then it's like anything, you get it now with football. Why do people... We're talking about it with youth development. Why do people involved in youth development? Why do they scout? It's not a hugely paid job. People want to be right about, they want to find a player, they want to see them in the first team, and they want to be right. There's a satisfaction about that, about being good at something. So I think that it was all about a kind of perfectionism, and this is the way it should be done, and trying to find a vehicle and a platform that you could do that.
You said before, I think you said you're not very good at being taught, or not good at all at being taught.
I don't like being taught.
You don't like being taught, but you're good at but you like to learn.
I love to learn, but I hate being taught. So let me give you an example. If you go skiing and somebody's trying to tell you how to ski, you put this weight on there and that weight on there, and then you try and do it. I mean, it's completely.
Yeah.
If you follow somebody who's really good at skiing and you copy them.
Yeah.
You kind of assume it's a lot easier way to learn. That
doesn't work for me, but I understand what you're saying.
It doesn't work in everything either.
Not in skiing.
But learning is often a process of trial and error. And back then, nobody knew what you could get out of these computers. Nobody knew how it worked. There wasn't a well-trodden path. I mean, we had scanners that were the size of this room that would digitize an image. This thing you can now do on your phone.
Sure.
It would take, could take an hour to digitize one image. We were positioning pictures relative to each other on a page, but all you could see was a green box. You couldn't actually see the picture on the screen in it. We had the first Quantel paint boxes. In fact, David Hockney came in to paint on we went to the Hockney exhibition, me and my sister in France, and he's got all the iPad drawings. And I think the first time he ever did that was at a company I was working at. He came on these Quantel. It's still online, the television series, Painting with Light.
Yeah.
So we had the first machines, the very first ones where you could actually airbrush and paint and create images from nothing on a screen. So it was you really had to invent it. There was nobody who'd come along and say, this is how you do this is how you do that. They could teach you the basics of how you went around the menu.
Yeah.
So it suited me because I had inordinate amounts of time to sit there and do it. And I think for anybody that was with me at school would have marvelled at the 20 or 20-year-old me who wouldn't leave work.
Yeah, you would
just have to be ripped away from the chair to go home.
Yeah.
Because I'd found, and I guess in a way, might have been the first sort of addiction to computer game type addiction, where I just couldn't believe what these computers were capable of doing.
Sure.
And of course, out of that, because you've got that enthusiasm and that love for it, you do fantastic things with other people, of course. And then in the end, I realised, rolling forward, as Apple Macs became available, that I probably wasn't actually the best at producing the work. There were people that were much more artistically talented than me, much more creative than me, and that they were the people that would drive that forward. But in structuring how the work's done, in organising it, in selling it to people, and building out solutions that use that, whether it was adapting people's ads globally and building a product for digital asset management and all those kind of things, innovating and ideas, that was really what I'd been doing when I was playing with these computers. I was trying to find out what they could do more than ending up being the person that was the best at actually doing it.
But if you like to learn and don't like being taught, there must have been periods in your career where you couldn't work it out for yourself. Somebody needed to guide you. Steve, you need to do it this way. Honestly, you're doing that wrong. You should try this. There must have been, as your business career developed, where you couldn't just say, no, I'm going to go and figure it all out for myself.
Of course. I mean,
Do you have a mentor? Did you have a mentor?
Yeah, I had a number. I was, again, going back to being an apprentice, I had a number of people through the years. I mean, I learned how to do the job that I did conventionally, first of all. So I had a chap called John Richardson who made me go to Athena, which were the art print shops.
Sure.
And I got one of those pop art images.
Yeah.
And I had to create those pop art images out of black and white lithographic film. I had to then etch the image into the film, but on each colour with the right levels of each colour, cyan, magenta, yellow and black, to then create this image as a project. I mean, it took me 6 months, and it probably cost the company 100,000 back then because of all the material that I used.
Yeah.
And then because I learned how to do that conventionally with such care, somebody, helping me do it, telling me where I'd gone wrong, and go and do it again. But it's very much a practical thing. And the same, when I started working with the computers, there would be other people that would be interested in them, and you're all, bouncing off each other. You're it's a frontier thing at the time, and you're, what I mean by being taught is people very specifically saying, do this, don't do that, do this. That's fine for the basics. But once you get beyond the basics and you're exploring, and of course, I gravitated towards things that I could do. I'm sure if I was trying to invent computer chips or whatever, I might needed a bit more, help to learn how to do it. But of course, I had people helping me and teaching me. But still, most of it is exploring yourself and trying to work it out.
So, how did you go from that? Just talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about TAG, how TAG evolved and how that.
So very quickly, I worked at this company called Inline Graphics. That was bought and it became a PLC, and I left there. I had a chap that I worked for, Tim Courtley. His father actually started the company Inline, and he was excellent. He was another guy that really helped me. Still a friend of mine now. He came back to work for me when I had TAG, and he was really helpful. And I had a chat to him one day, and I said, "Look, I don't think I'm going to do this forever." And he said, "Really, I think you should leave. You should go and do some other jobs." And it got to a plateau. I wasn't really learning anything. Even though I remember, there's a great story. At night, they had a brand new machine. It's called a Cytex Mart system or something. They'd given it to us as a trial, the company. And I used to, when I had no work, which was quite often, you'd quite often just be waiting for things to do, I would go and play with this thing. You could scan images in and you could see them in colour and you could retouch them. It was all one unit. I remember one of the union guys saying, "Why are you doing that?" So I said, "What do you mean? Why am I doing it? Why are you doing that? You're doing too much. You don't need to do that for the man, for the employee, And I said, "I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me.
Do it for yourself."
So he said, "What do you mean?" So I said, "Well, let's say they came down and took away my job tomorrow, this nasty employer that they'd sacked me. They wouldn't be able to take away what I'd learned, would they? There are about 4 of these machines in the world.
Yeah.
And I've got one. And you want me to go and sit over there and ignore it when I can be learning it and play with it?" So I left there. I went and did a job in Bromley on nights, which was nice company, nice people, but not for me. And then I'd been for an interview while I was at Inline when I was very young. This chap, Murray Stroud, had contacted me, had heard about me somewhere, and I went for an interview, and they were making the first electronic transparencies. This is where they were doing the really high-end retouching with these paint box things. And he talked to me all about what they were doing and how they were doing it. And it was too early for me. I just wasn't quite ready. It was just a bit much. And I went back, and there was a chap I was working with, and I said, "Look, I've just been offered this job, but I just don't think I'm ready for it. I think I'm going to stay here for a little bit longer, but you should go and do it." He went and did it, and it was a joint venture. Long story short, that joint venture broke up, and while I'm working in Bromley, they contacted me again. I wasn't enjoying the job I was at. The hours were not great, and I felt more ready, to do something. And so I went and I worked at this place called Electronic Colour Studios, which was linked to another business called Ad Plates, and basically put me in charge. I mean, I was quite shocked the first day. I'd been literally in charge.
How old were you then?
I was only 23, something like that, 22, 23. And of course, it was a strange world then. There was all of the sales guys, they got the business by taking people out and lunching them. They were basically functioning alcoholics. I mean, when I say basically functioning, extreme alcoholics.
Yeah.
There was a very much, the salespeople were very combative against the production staff. Anyway, I ran that for a while. And then as the kind of whole computer graphics thing evolved, we found a piece of software from a German company that we thought could really help us, was a game changer. And we bought it, and we were using it and kind of pushing the boundaries with this thing. And then the company that was selling it, they got into financial trouble. And we were using it and had become quite reliant on it. So we didn't want them to go out of business. So long story short, we bought a piece of this company along with some other people around the world and became the dealer for it in the UK. And then I basically assumed 2 jobs, which was being the managing director of this company that was a dealer for this technology and also still running production. And then by that time, they'd merged my company in with the main business and they'd put me in charge of production there. And the business was struggling because it was changing and these guys that were going out getting the business were too slow moving and work was moving faster than Mac was coming in. So I was demoing this software up and down the country and building this other business that was selling this software and then learning about profit and loss and depreciation. And, you know, I had another guy called Paul Jackson who was very influential in my life. He was an accountant, you know him, and, you know, had a big accountancy practice and he was very patient with me. And, you know, because at one point.
Did you let him teach you?
Yeah, but again, on the job, you know, that's me asking, what's that mean? What's depreciation? Yeah, but it's not, when I say being taught, you know, I mean in a formal setting in a classroom. In the end, this business that was selling this software was blowing the lights out and the main business was really struggling. And then I had one of those moments, something happened in my life, and I had one of those moments of, am I going to stay doing this forever? A bit like when I was at Waste. That was the question I always asked myself. Am I going to do this forever? What I'm doing now? If I'm not going to do it forever, then why am I doing it a day longer?
Yeah.
I went and had a chat to them because insidiously, somehow, I now knew all the clients on the production side. I had this one thing with an agency where I'd put a micro version of what we did. Essentially, I put it into an advertising agency to do all of the computer graphics for them as a sort of joint venture. And that had taken off. And you could see a route where you could get a lot of those. And up until that point, the industry was really about finding a client, getting the work off of them, working out how they wanted to do the work, having a big central resource to do it, and trying to work out how you worked with them in an individualistic way and work with another client individualistically. And you didn't really have a process for doing it. Everybody was kind of almost working against each other in the company. You had one big computer graphics floor, one big project management floor. You fundamentally just managed dissatisfaction amongst the clients, right? Because you just couldn't do all the communication, flow of communication was poor. It was some creative guy to an account guy in an agency to what they call a traffic person to a drunk rep who'd bring it back and brief it to somebody else, who'd then brief it to somebody else, who'd then take it down the production floor. It'd then take you hours to do it, maybe a day to do it. Then they'd see it and they'd say it was wrong. And everybody was working crazy hours. And it was all... And then when we put this into a client and they just had their own people, their own staff, it worked in the way they wanted. Suddenly it felt like we had a product that you could just sell to lots of different people. And the client satisfaction went from, you know, minus whatever to plus 100, you know, and they would just keep giving you more work. And I suddenly saw, you know, the really, for all the partisan behavior, for all the fact that, you know, this rep thinks that they're the one that gets the work because the traffic guy loves them and it's all about me. It's not about that. It's actually just about doing it. If you can just find a way of doing the work well and being more efficient than everybody else and having a better process, you'll get more business. And there's a lot more business. And that obviously there were some people that owned this business and they're, you know, they were older and they could see it was all changing. So I made an offer they said, oh, you know, don't leave and start your own thing. We'll sell you 25% of the business. And so I had to raise the money, which was impossible. I mean, when you think now about raising money and how easily people raise money, I mean, I tried everything. And the only way I could do it, there was a guy at the Royal Bank of Scotland in Bromley, and he gave me a second mortgage on my house. My wife then, with the kids, had to go and see the solicitor because you were risking the family home and all this stuff. And so I did the deal with him. And Paul said to me, he said, I don't know if you want to do this deal. He said, you know, you're going to buy 25% of the business. They're going to own 75% of the business. And then what are you going to do? You just keep making it a better business and it's going to create value for the 75%.
Yeah.
So he said, what do you suggest? Well, see if you can get an option. See if you can get, like, they're not going to sell you the rest of it now, but see if you can get an option. So I went to them and said, look, you know, I'd like an option to buy the rest of it. So we set it at what then seemed a crazy amount of money. It was like 14 million, I think it was, something like that. 8 months later, I had 14 million. I bought it off them. And that was just because the other one was just, look, everybody needs to let me get on with it. And they did, to be fair. They were great as well, by the way. Murray, I went to work for originally. He'd been poorly, so he'd taken a back seat.
Yeah.
But they were incredible. They let me get on with it, and we completely re-engineered the business, renamed it, merged it all together, called it Tag. I mean, it was really close to going under at certain points before then. And we got lucky because, the early days of the internet were coming and we could start to share images. And it just took off.
And when you sold it, when you exited, was that pre-planned? Or was
No,
it serendipitous? You were just approached, or did we have a game plan to get out?
Yeah, everybody talks in these things about how brilliant they were. I mean, that was probably one of the worst decisions I ever made was selling it, and that was all to do.
Why? Because you should have, if you hung on to it for longer, you'd have made more money out of it.
Yeah, well, I didn't realise when you're in these things, as you probably know in your business. I didn't realise, and this was a testament to all of the people that come to work for me at the time and everything we'd built. It was a great business and we had loads of fun. Everybody works really hard. We had thousands of people all over the world at this point. And I didn't realise, because a client's job is to always make you feel paranoid, right? By this time, we've got much more sophisticated clients who are in marketing directors and procurement people. And, they're always kind of trying to keep us on the edge, aren't they? But we were miles away from everybody else. We had a huge margin. I mean, even when I sold it, I don't think they were great at driving it forward to people after us, but bits of business that I thought we might lose in the next 6 months, 10 years later, they still had the business without. And that was partly because, the more the internet came on, clients got absorbed by doing other things. It became, a big piece, but not as important piece of what they were doing. And they were just happy that somebody was managing it and it was going okay. But there were a lot of things going on at the time, in my personal life. And I bought the club, which was a big diversion.
We're going to come on to that. So to what extent were the two things linked in that did you already have your eye on the club? Or was that something that you really turned your mind to properly once you'd sold out of Tag?
No, I was just a fan of the club. So in 2008, I sold a bit of the business just to get some, money off the table. I mean, one of the things I would say now to people that are running businesses that are successful, if they're making a profit, is to enjoy some of the profits. I think that's one of the reasons people sell businesses too soon. The old days, people used to have a business and they didn't think about selling it. In fact, when we started, we didn't think about selling the business. I bought the buildings in the company because I thought that'd be the only pension that I would have. Multiples of profit and things like that weren't really for those types of businesses then. So I wish I'd taken more money out as I went along. But I didn't. I didn't pay myself enough, really, even though we were making a lot of money. For some reason, I had in my head that it was only selling parts of it that would really realise. And of course, you do live in a land of paranoia. You've got clients and, you think you have a run on the bank one day and it's all going to come crumbling down. So I de-risked a bit and sold a little bit of it. And then it was a financial crisis. We took a bit of a backward step, but nothing really to worry about. Then we boomed off of the back of people trying to save money because we were an incredibly cost-effective way of producing advertising, and global messaging became more important. And actually, we would take an original creative idea and then make thousands of iterations from it. That was what we were incredibly good at, and that became much more important, because people had so many channels that they needed to get messages out to. So then the football club got into trouble, and Ron Nodes, one of the old owners, came on to me and said, "Is it something I wanted to get involved in?" And the only reason they got to me was because I sponsored the back of the shirt because I was a fan. So
you mean Tag?
Tag, yeah. So there were just a lot of things going on at once.
And was your dad and your mum, you're all Crystal Palace fans? Or was it?
No, my dad was a Millwall fan.
Oh, really?
And my dad asked me when I was 4 years old, I said, my dad didn't really like football.
Right.
He didn't really want to take me. And,
okay.
I don't think he thought I was very good. He would stand on the touchline watching me when I wasn't going to make it. I mean, by this time, my life's gone so far beyond what my parents ever thought it would be. They've decided I'm just a mystery best left to myself.
Work it out.
They were definitely, as you know, Lynn's very smart. Of the two offspring that they had, I was not the one that was destined to achieve much. But I know my dad was really worried about me buying the football club. By this time, I think he was poorly by this time. And, he was, you sure?
What year are we in?
2010.
Right.
Yeah. In the end, I think I should have kept the company, put somebody to run it, and the football. But what I had was a kind of passion transference. Not in the fact that I didn't love the club beforehand, but in what could be achieved.
So do you think that if you'd had an opportunity to keep the tag business, you'd kept it because for purely financial reasons, or because
I still loved it? The problem is I was too much of a megalomaniac in it. I didn't realise. I mean, I've run the football club differently, partly because you have to, but I didn't realise. I mean, you doing everything. If probably in that business at the time, if I gave 100% of my time and brain power to it, that probably was the best solution for the business. But you can't give 100% to everything. So in the end, you have to realise that 40% of you or 20% of you isn't as good as 100% of somebody else. And actually, the more you give people the license, the better they'll become, right? Yes. And so I had some unbelievably good people. I knew that, that were running business. But some of them wanted an exit as well. I'd given them some shares, and they wanted to make money. So there's a bit of a pressure there, but I can't blame them on that because I'm quite single-minded. So I just think I did enjoy it. I did love it. I just didn't love being at the beck and call with clients. I didn't love, I'd done by that time, I don't know, 20 years of getting on planes at, it's like you look at your diary now and I say, what am I doing tomorrow? I'm in Geneva.
Yeah, it is.
What time's the flight? 7:00. What time does that mean I've got to leave? 3 a.m.
Yeah.
What time is it now? 11:00 at night, and I'm still out with clients. So you just get to a point where you kind of want a rest and
a rest. So you think buying a football club is a rest?
A rest from that subject,
right?
Not a rest from doing things.
But did you have any real idea of what it meant to run a football club? Buying one is one thing, but did you understand enough about that business as a business?
No.
Before you went into it?
I knew
was it a shock?
I knew it was really hard.
Yeah.
I'd watched Mark Goldberg and the owner after that. I knew it was a business that didn't really have a profit principle, and I knew our club, through twists of fate, had ended up in a situation where, it didn't own the stadium and, it had a lot of challenges associated with it.
But did you understand, it's regulated, the economics are kind of mind-bending, even for people who understand, who are pretty numerate.
I mean, then it wasn't particularly regulated. I mean, there was no spending regulation or anything like that.
I know that's relatively. I know that's recent.
I mean, no. What's astonishing when I started to look at it, what is astonishing is just how much money they lose, and they've always lost, and how almost impossible it is to.
Did you? I mean, did that not terrify you, particularly knowing you as I do? I mean, you're meticulous. You are, very, very on the detail, as you've already said. You're across everything. It could be.
I'm also entirely capable of overestimating myself.
No, it's not about whether you and your personality, but it's about the nature of that business itself. You're going into something where, I don't know, everybody at whatever level the clubs are operating loses money. The cost of buying players, selling, all that stuff is huge. You've got enormous pressure from fans who think everybody does a shit job most of the time anyway, presumably. Although you are I think a notable exception in that. But I'm talking.
You can find people.
Huh?
I think you can find people.
Think you don't know what you do.
Of course.
Well, of course, but not many, relatively speaking.
No.
So when you go into this, it's a brand new. It's something that you've got no, apart from watching it, enjoying it, being a fan, sponsoring the shirts, hanging out and getting privileges, presumably in the director's box and stuff like that. You've got no real idea what you're going into.
No, I don't think you would go into it if you had any real idea of what you were going into. I think that what informed me was I'd taken a business that was, in a bad way and bought it and turned it into something else. But going back to that, I think I saw it somewhere, that this overestimating yourself. I mean, you overestimate yourself most of the time, you're wrong. right? Most of the time you shouldn't, and actually you learn in life as you go through life that most of the time you're wrong, and therefore you don't take on challenges that you used to when you were younger. But when you're younger, one of the
but
I just thought I would do it different to everybody
Steve,
else.
is that really about appetite for risk underneath all that?
No, I think
actually you are. You know, if you overestimate yourself, you don't think you're taking a risk, or you.
I thought, and again, I think it's different now because I think people are far more questioning and you know, you can see it on social media, right? Everybody's got the right answer for everything. But I think then I thought, and to some extent I was right, is that people don't challenge the status quo. They don't do different things. They're not prepared to go down a road that's maybe unpopular with the fans. They're not prepared to have a long-term plan. They're not prepared to say no. I'd looked from afar and I didn't really know what I would do, but I thought, well, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that. And I know a lot of people do that in football now, but I think it was rarer then. I think it was rarer to feel like, I don't know, I'll get in there, I'll find out what it's all about, and I'll find a way of doing it differently. I won't allow there to be any taboos about what we think about how we can run this place and what we can do. And also, I think there's something about low expectations. You know, I think I've always been underestimated. I think it's also useful to have businesses that are underestimated, or in this case, a football club.
You've been underestimated what by people who look at.
Yeah, because I don't have a, you know, I suppose I don't have a chip on my shoulder about it. But you know, if you don't go to university, you don't have a formal education, and there are, you know, then there were far more barriers. You know, I remember going and doing work experience in an advertising agency when I was 17, 18, and I knew, you know, they're going to put me in the post room this lot. There's no way they're going to put me anywhere that I want to work in this place. You know, I don't have the right accent.
Sure.
You know, I'm not reading the right books, even though I loved reading books, but I wasn't reading the books that, you know, I didn't have the right accent. I just wasn't the right profile of person. So I kind of knew that I had to go somewhere less fashionable, a bit scrappier. And again, going back to the way my mum was, my dad was, you know, they were always questioning things. They were always outliers, really, in a lot of cases. So I think, you know, you just think, I'll get in there and I'll do something differently. And I say it now about football. I mean, we looked at Chelsea recently, you know, when they came in and they were doing the 8-year contract, and everyone was saying, oh, it's ridiculous. Well, why is it ridiculous? Maybe it's a good idea.
Yeah.
They're just doing it differently to the way anybody else did it, right? And so it's proven to be the case. You know, I think Baydad and Todd, but, you know, Baydad I deal with a lot. I mean, I think he's a very, very, very clever guy, you know, and he's doing, and I think that goes to love to learn, right? You know, I love watching people do something different. So everybody that comes into football, I think, thinks they're going to do it differently. I think then I was a little bit of an outlier, like I really was prepared to do it differently. And, you know, I think when you're in a good situation, when the fans are just pleased to see somebody, you know, save the club, you know, it's going to give you a lot more latitude and a bit more time and the way that you can do things differently. So I didn't think I'd have it for long. You know, I just bought it out of administration.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Did you resist? It wasn't a long-term plan. Did you see yourself as a sort of interim caretaker?
Yes. I mean, nobody would buy it. I mean, now it seems, I mean, even now football clubs, this is the thing I think the new regulator is going to find, you know, you can get all, I mean, it's important that we have the right people owning football clubs, but at a certain point, you know, you just need somebody to put some money in to keep them going for the
Well, their idea of the right people might not be the...
I think we could probably all agree on what the wrong people are broadly, you know, but I think that in the end, you know, sometimes there are scant amount of buyers for clubs when they're in certain situations, and the economy maybe is in a certain situation as it was then. You know? So you know, the administrator made it clear that, you know, we couldn't keep it going much longer. There was nobody else had come along. I found 3 guys that wanted to do it with me and were prepared to put the money in on a whim, basically, you know, incredibly supportive. And then I said that I wouldn't buy it without the stadium, and the stadium was in another administration with HBOS that had gone bankrupt. And I thought, well, that's probably us out of it now, because, you know, they won't talk to me about selling me the ground, and I'm not going to do it without the ground. I remember sitting on my sofa issuing this statement under this CPFC 2010 banner that I'd created. And then the next day there were thousands of fans outside Lloyd's Bank with drums and fireworks. And then they were on the phone to me, you know, what is it? What do you want? We'll sell it to you. And that was the point I probably realised I wasn't going to get out of it.
was somewhere in the back of your mind, were you hoping that HBOS wouldn't have done a deal, or were you actually pleased?
I think you always do. I mean, I've watched a lot of very successful and wealthy people in my life now. I've been very fortunate. And one thing I would say about all of them is we're all far less decisive than people think we are about those big things in your life. So you vacillate between I want it, oh, I've got it, have I?
Yeah.
Not sure I want it.
Buyer's remorse kicks in.
The Great Maureen Lipton advert with all the colours and all the sizes, not exactly all the rage then, are they?
Exactly.
The guys that came along with me wanted to do it, and I was racing cars at the time, and I had a big accident, and I was in hospital on quite a lot of pethidine when I signed for it. I'm still convinced even now that had a
yeah,
that had to do with it.
But you must think it's one of the best decisions in your life.
Oh, it's been an incredible journey. Yeah, absolutely.
Across all kinds of, not just financially, but also in terms of the world that it's opened up that's completely different, presumably, from the world that you were in, the opportunities, that people that you've met that you might never have met otherwise.
Ian, for the one day, I know you'll talk about it at Wembley, to have all of your family there and all of your friends. Yeah. So people say, it's the best day of my life.
Yeah.
And they say, well, what about when your daughter was born? Well, when that one was born, the other one wasn't there, were they? So this was all of the people you love in the world.
Yeah.
And then to see what it meant to people and to hear what it meant to people is incredible. So, 15 years of work, I lit a fuse, and then obviously, a lot of great people have been involved in it, not least, the manager and those players, because at the end of the day, football's about, the players and the manager, right? And they're the people that won it, but obviously I had a part to play in it, and to be a part of that and to see that outpouring of joy from so many people, certainly, there's no looking back from that. It makes it worthwhile. It did make me think, would it have been worth it if we hadn't won something? Would I have looked back and felt, or was that really? But I think because of what we've done with the club and where it's come from and where it is now, I think if there is such a thing still about community, if you do have an affinity to your local area, and that's something as a club, in a strange way, we struggle with, because we're not a Leeds, we don't own a town. Crystal Palace is a relatively small place, but we've created this South London and proud, and I think we've given South London something to really feel good about, and to that extent, absolutely, it's been worth it.
All the noise that you get around, you mentioned the fans going to picket outside HBOS, but particularly the social media stuff that comes at you left, right, and centre. How do you pay any attention to that? Do you filter it out, or does it bother you, upset you, when it's negative, obviously? And do you get excited when people say nice things?
Look, there's no right and wrong way of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
As I often say, when a player scores against us that we could have signed at the beginning, you think, but you get offered pretty much every player in your stratosphere, So I do listen to some of it, because, there's an element, isn't there, of kind of crowdsourcing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's so much interesting stuff out there, stats that you see. And so I do listen to some of it. Even some of the abuses, if it's funny, some of it's quite funny, right? I would go, people use words like resilient and all that. I think you have to be a bit more than that. I think you have to be a bit F you.
Yeah.
You have to be a bit, it kind of helps in a way. We talked about, I think before, sometimes you don't know what you think about something until somebody says something that you don't agree with, and it makes you get that reaction to it, and it makes you think about it. Mm-hmm. So I think some of it is good. Some of it, it's people care passionately about their football club. Usually we come back to how much it meant to people. People, when people were coming out saying, "I can die happy man," they meant it. They weren't, and families and people crying. And so when you know what it means to you, and you know what it means to them, and that, it comes from that place, right? They just want it to do well. When I had the cup, there's always a bit of trepidation, when you're a chairman, because you're a bit of a Marmite figure, sometimes. And because you're there to do the difficult things, as I've said I remember saying to Roy, when Wilf wasn't very happy because he wasn't getting to go, and Roy said to me, what do I say about it? And I said, look, Roy, the important thing is that you lot are all together at the training ground. That he's not upset with you, right? So that's what really is good for the club.
Yeah.
So just say, look, he's got, the chairman won't let him go or won't. I don't know what it was, but that took about 35 seconds. He went straight.
Really?
I don't blame him. But you are, there's an ebb and a flow. But in that moment, the reception that I got from the fans. So, there's no one going, oh, I'm not going to celebrate with Steve. They know that I care. They know that I care as much as they do. They know that I want to win. They know that I want that day for them. And in some ways, there were loads of reasons we won. And I like talking about myself because, Oliver Glasner's one of the most inspirational people I've met in my life. I mean, he is an elite level above most people that I know in terms of his positivity and his attention to detail and all the kind of things you want. And the players are the most exceptional group of players and people. And there's a lot of things that, have guided them to that success. But in that moment, going back 2 years before, I had realised it's all right for me to have this vision for the club where I'm going to, we're going to build things and the infrastructure is going to be better. And maybe in 10 years' time, we can think about winning things. That's not why people come to football. That's not what they come for. They don't come to watch us being okay. Mm-hmm. But it's all right because Steve's going to build us a stadium when I'm not here anymore. And you're getting that feedback from people, right? And if you don't listen, then you're not going to really lead anything well. So that's when I thought, look, I always wanted to win the FA Cup. We had a go when Alan was there, and I got a bit stung by it because we bought players that were just for now. And they were great players, but they didn't have any resale value. So once that squad got to a stage, we struggled to refinance a new squad. Mm-hmm. And what you're seeing all over the Premier League now is a completely different strategy in all clubs where everybody's trying to buy young, get to a kind of confluence of events where that team's a good team, win something, outperform, and then kind of reinvent yourself to a certain point. So, with Dougie Friedman, another person who really needs mentioning, we'd embarked on this strategy, and then it was really about trying to get a leader, of the team that had that positivity and wanted to play on the front foot. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things in life for me that I do. I sit and I think, what will I regret least? Mm-hmm. What will I regret least? When I was asked at base, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay? What am I going to regret the least? I think I'm going to regret staying here forever.
Yeah.
More than I would regret going and doing something else. The first January in the Premier League, when we were really struggling and we needed to maybe buy some players to survive, and it was only, me and my mates at the time, and if you looked at the cash flow at the end of the championship, it all looked a bit grim. And I thought, what am I going to regret more? I'm going to regret not trying much more. It's taken this club 10 years to get to the Premier League. Yeah. Every time it gets relegated, it takes another 10 years to get back. Maybe it never gets back. And I'm going to waste that opportunity in this January. So again, I had a moment of, why don't we try and win? Man United winning the FA Cup last year really cemented that for me because I thought they haven't got a very good team at the moment, Man United. I'm not being disrespectful, but I think they would accept that, it wasn't functioning well as a team. I'm not talking about the individual players. I'm not here to, they're all great players, but they weren't a great team at that. But they're Man United. They win things. That's what they do. So they went to the cup final against Man City and they won it. Yeah. Because they win things, because they're Man United. And that's the expectation.
Yes.
And, you get bits of energy. I bought the club. I believed that we could get out of the Championship and into the Premier League. I believed that we could stay there. I had that vision. Dougie came along when I was flagging a little bit, and he believed we could do a bit better on our recruitment, and I thought we could, and he was the person to do it, and we did that. And then Oliver comes along, and he believes to the core of his being that he can win things with the right ingredients. If you give him the right tools. So I think that's really how we ended up getting to where we were getting to, partly because of the feedback from the fans. What are you doing it for? What have you got a football club for? I think you have to keep asking yourself in life, what am I doing this for? What's the end goal? What am I trying to achieve? What am I going to look back on? And I felt that we needed to try and go again and win something. The FA Cup had been a dream of mine since 1976 when we got knocked out of the semi-finals, the third division club, and I cried my eyes out. And then in 1990, when I was at work and I watched us, and Mark Bright and Ian, who are now I'm fortunate enough to call friends, nearly won us the league. But we always had this brittleness about us. And I think the biggest change of that was in the semi-final this year when we played Aston Villa, a good team. We were 1-up. We got a penalty, and JP, who never misses really, just scraped the post. And the whole belief system of the club had changed from anything it had been before, partly because of the longevity in the Premier League and all of those things. A huge amount to do with Oliver, partly because of the faith, I think, of the players. You know, a lot of the players have got a lot of different religions, but, you know, they all believe in a God, and that their destiny, you know, was to win. And that all of that belief system was transmitted to the fans. I think most fans and sport players would agree. In most of our history, that would have scraped the post. The fans would have got nervous. That would have transmitted to the players. The players would have got nervous. In the next 10 minutes, we maybe conceded a goal, then another one, then been 2-1 down. Then we'd have rallied. We'd have had a valiant attempt, but we'd have gone out, you know, in the semi-final. And it was just 180 degrees difference. The fans didn't care. We were going to win the game. The players didn't care. We've missed a penalty. We're going to win the game. And I can almost hear myself talking like Oliver sometimes, because that's his attitude.
Just yeah, but and articulates, presumably he articulates these thoughts like that.
He really does.
Yeah.
And I mean, he said to me before the game in the week, he said to me, and I try and use his turn of phrase a bit because it's so engaging. I watched them again. We will score 2 goals.
Right.
And we did score 2 goals. If you remember, one was this. We will score 2 goals. And then he does this thing, this contrarian thing, which is, he says, I don't know how many they will score.
It's brilliant.
We have a very good team. But we will score 2 goals. And if we can keep them out. Now, that alone, right, if you go into a game thinking we're going to score 2 goals today.
Yeah.
If we score 2 goals, that's a massive chance of winning.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of that is down to the fans and the feedback and understanding what people want out of this thing that isn't a business. You know, it's not a business. It's a community asset. And in the end, what's it there for? It's there for the joy of the community.
On that subject, what's Palace for Life about?
So Palace for Life is our foundation.
Yeah.
So it's all of the clubs, in some respects, professional clubs have got some kind of charity or foundation. I think our one is particularly relevant because of the area and because of the difficulties with knife crime and youth unemployment, etc. So there's about 80 people in there. They do a variety of things, from obviously coaching courses and, you know, keeping people out of mischief in the summer. But some really, really good projects. So they've got one called Divert, where coaches, players go into police stations when young offenders come in for the first time, knock on the cell door. Obviously, somebody in a Palace kit and a Palace badge is less confrontational maybe than a social worker in a suit.
Yes.
And then sits down and has a chat to them, and it's all about diverting them out of that lifestyle. You know, a lifestyle perhaps which they think is preordained for them. It's just a lifestyle that everybody else goes into, and giving them some options. There's also one around youth unemployment and education. So, you know, we've got a huge amount of young people that are not in full-time employment, not in full-time education. So we run courses with groups, cohorts of kids. Sometimes, you know, they've got educational needs or disabilities. Sometimes they're just falling on hard times. Sometimes they're just falling through the cracks. And the objective is to get as many of them at the end into full-time employment. And some of my partners add extra funding onto that. You know, we get funding, we raise funding, we add extra funding onto it, and it does a tremendous amount of good. It's I think the government, Pat McFadden came this week to look at that particular program. Where the one bit that I gave to it when I arrived was, I said, I don't want it to do fluffy things. There's nothing wrong with fluffy things, but I don't want us to just doing an event, you know, or what are the outcomes we're trying to create in the area? How are we going to try and make a change to young people's lives through the power of sport, engaging them with sport? And then there's some Premier League ones called Primary Stars or All Stars, where you go into primary schools and kids with learning difficulties, you get the coaches to try and engage them through football, maybe learning maths through playing football, etc. So, you know, because of the Premier League and all the column inches that are taken up by, you know, the football and the noise, all of the good that all of the clubs do, not just in the Premier League, is sometimes lost. But they do a tremendous amount of good. They invest an enormous amount and they make a real difference. And now Palace for Life is run by a guy called Mike Summers. Excellent guy. And all of the money, or as much as possible of the money, goes into helping people.
Have you seen I've been watching the Freddie Flintoff show?
No, I must do that. I haven't.
You not watched either?
No, I don't have a lot of time. But apparently it's amazing, yeah.
Oh my, I mean, Emma and I were watching it last night, the last 2 episodes. I mean, you're almost in tears watching it. It is so inspiring.
It's amazing.
It's a kind of version of what you've been talking about. But you talk also about cricket, which is not the most accessible game to any of it's not accessible at all to any of these kids, both girls and boys. And what he does, I don't know how he's got something about him where obviously he's an engaging personality, but he doesn't use lots of words. He's not kind of doing, big, bold, rallying speeches to these kids. He's just talking to them in a way where they know he'll be very disappointed if they let him down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in a quite a quiet way.
Yeah.
It's a surprise to see him actually as a lead. It's surprising because of the maybe preconceptions about the sort of guy he is. But it's really worthwhile. I mean, it is. If you're interested in...
I mean, he's a great guy. And we both had racing incidents driving cars.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So that was where I was coming on to what doing things other than business.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Roy Hodgson. He's got a lot of interests, as I understand it, outside football.
Yeah, he's great. I used to go to Jews and we used to talk about Sebastian Falk's books. And
yes.
Yeah, he's very learned.
He speaks a lot of languages.
Lovely man, and somebody who's been so important to our club in all the COVID years and when it was a real grind. Roy's one of those old school dig in. The harder it gets, the more he likes it really. So he's a smashing person, and he's friends with Giles Smith in the Times.
I know.
Bill Nye, and they go and talk about books that
fantastic.
The words are too long for me. But
well, I remember a long time ago going into your office, and you saying, "I won't be a minute," because he was sitting in a sort of, I think it was a Formula One simulator.
Oh right, yeah.
Which was in
your track for
the
the weekend, yeah.
I went in, and you went, "I won't be a minute."
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
So that's your one.
I don't do it anymore. I haven't done it for a long time. Once I had that accident, I mean, I wasn't as quick as I needed to be anyway, but then, you start overthinking it a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's one of those things. What am I going to regret more?
Yeah.
I mean, once you've seen too many barriers, I was okay when I started.
Did you have a dream when you were young of being a racing driver?
I liked any kind of sport that you could excel at. And I thought I had good reactions and I could do the technical part of the sport, but maybe it was the physical, the athleticism. Mm-hmm. And that if you had a car with 950 brake horsepower, the athleticism was in the car, right? And you could just concentrate on that. I mean, I loved it when I did it. I still miss it. Some great times. Did all the circuits around the country, some of the ones in Europe.
Do you watch it? Do you go to the Formula One?
No, I don't really love Formula One. I really like the racing I did, I did British GT, Carrera Cup. I didn't do British Touring Car because that's the elite of everybody in that is a professional driver, more or less,
Right. So cars, anything else? Music? Do you like music?
Yeah, I like music. I mean, I think if you're running a football club, it is pretty consuming.
Yeah.
I've got other business interests. I've got commercial property and I invest in companies. We just exited a marketing services company called Inside Ideas, which was a sort of run on from my old business. So every now and again, I like to get back involved with something I really understand what I'm doing that isn't chaos theory, which is when you're involved in sport, you're controlling a process. When you're involved in business, you're much more outcomes focused, particularly if you get to some kind of dominant market position.
But you're involved in a business that happens to be in sport too.
It is. Look, there's so much going on with the club. We built out the academy, the training ground. We started on the stadium in January. There's so much to do.
Have you got another season of the Amazon?
No, we didn't get our second season.
Did you not?
No.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it was good though. I don't know if you watched it.
I did watch it. Are you kidding? Of course I watched it.
I liked it.
Yeah.
No, it was great for the club to have that, and I think it garners quite a lot of attention.
Right.
But,
absolutely.
the best thing you can do in football is to win. I mean, tick in everything since the FA
But the
Cup.
best thing in everything is to win, surely.
Yes, but I'm talking from a marketing sense.
From a
I mean, you can make all those documentaries and you can do all that stuff. And I mean, unless you're an outlier, I mean, what the guys have done at Wrexham is extraordinary and fantastic for Wrexham. And the way they've thrown themselves into it and become part of the community and the team is extraordinarily exciting. And they, you know, they're Ryan Reynolds and
Of course,
they've got global attention. Whereas for us, you know, it's really about trying to win, trying to outperform, trying to climb the table, build the infrastructure out, become more of a desirable football club for people around the world to follow.
So you couldn't really, I guess, from everything you've been saying, I'm answering the question that I'm about to ask you, but I'm assuming you couldn't distill all your experiences into not necessarily sound bites, but some very, you know, a thought that says what it has taken for me to get to where I am now is because I am that kind of person, or I think this way because other people don't. Is there a characteristic that you think you've got that has enabled all of these things for you to happen?
I think there's a drive and there's a how would you encapsulate never really being content?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Impatient.
not really impatient. I mean, never really content. Never really feel that things are exactly as you would want them or as good as they could be. I think you have to be hugely self-critical, unfortunately, and you learn to be slightly less of a perfectionist because otherwise you end up being penny wise and pound foolish. You know, you focus on tiny things that don't really matter instead of the big picture. Find something you love doing. I think that's so important. You have to find something that you really love doing. There's no amount of perseverance and resilience and stoicism that is going to make you get up every day and do something that you really don't want to do.
Sure.
So find something you love doing. Get great people around you. And we've talked about some of the great people we've had, you know, at the football club. I had great people in my advertising business. We spoke about some of those. Find a way that you can outperform. There's always a way that you can do it, you know, and constantly question. I mean, we're looking now at the transfer market, what happened in the summer. Who are the people that we think are doing a better job than us? Why are they doing a better job than us? You know, mercilessly plagiarize other people's work, you know, in business. You know, you can't possibly have all the good ideas. You know, what are other people? Which is why you need the right balance of being single-minded and open. It's quite a, you know, strange. So unfortunately, it's not one particularly insightful soundbite.
No, but it's very good.
It's all useful stuff.
It's all very, yes.
Yeah.
It's very useful stuff. But have you got one more project in you, different? You went from computer graphics to had marketing services to football.
Maybe. I mean, I'd like...
Are we going to get a scoop?
No, I don't think so. Maybe. I mean, I've often thought about going back into advertising.
Really?
Yeah, because I think there's a moment of when I happened to, you know, I had the happenstance to exit at a moment of change, and there's another one happening with AI, Gen AI. You know, I mean, I don't know how much AI will influence other professions, but when you can make a commercial from words, I mean, I don't know if you've seen. There's a Liquid Death with the water commercial online. If people have not seen what you can do by just typing in words, it's extraordinary. I'm sure, you know, I know there are limitations to it, but still. So I think that's quite interesting. But right now I'm focused on what I wanted to achieve with the football club. When I used to go as a kid, Highbury and Sellers Park were pretty similar. You know, it wasn't a totally different experience. They've had the Emirates for God knows how long, you know, still in Sellers Park. Most we love it. And it's, you know, we're not going to move, but it's as it was. So I really want to know the last 15 years I've been for a reason, you know, and I think with winning the cup, which is, I walked into West Ham at the weekend and I don't know, suddenly felt a bit, you know, because for years we were one of those teams that haven't won anything, you know, so you always felt a little bit of,
so you had a little bit more spring.
I just feel like, you know, and there's still, I didn't realise, still amazing teams. I won't know names that haven't ever won a trophy. And, you know, we won 2 in a year with the Community Shield. So I want the club to make sure it uses that as a platform to go on. You know, with me there, one day it'll be without me, won't it? You know, it's a football club. It's going to go on forever. So what is the best situation for the football club to be in. You know, I do think I know a lot about it. I think that, you know, the way that we do it is more or less right, but in an ever-changing world where you can't ever rest on your laurels because there's always a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
But with the new regulatory environment, what is the best for it? So I've got to work that out. You know, I've got to make sure that that's really on solid ground. And then, you know, maybe we just exited this other marketing services company. That is what I innately know. You know, I was never been a professional footballer. I'm not a coach, you know, and I can set the scene. I can pick the right people. But sometimes it's nice to get into something where you know, you can do every facet.
So you might go again.
Maybe.
Right.
I'm 60 now, Ian, so it's not.
Are you?
Not that easy, you know.
Older than you. I mean,
Are you? Not, are you? Oh, yeah.
well, I'm just
66, yeah. Ish.
66 in a minute. Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Of course, yeah.
Sorry, let's not talk about that.
We don't, it's not the same, is it, was when we were kids?
No, 66 is young.
It feels different,
It
doesn't
does
it?
feel different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your family, the male members of your family wouldn't dress and look like you
No.
at 60.
No.
They'd be sitting, smoking a pipe.
Yeah. Doing things that weren't particularly good for them, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Drinking pints in the pub or whatever.
Yes.
Anyway, you look great.
Oh, thanks, Ian.
What's the regime?
Right.
What do you do? What do you do? Exercise.
Yeah, I'm good with exercise.
Moisturize.
I stopped drinking.
Oh, yeah, I remember, yeah.
I stopped drinking 8 years ago. It was quite good. Good genes as well, right? My mum lived to 90, and
Fantastic.
so
Yeah.
some good genes.
And you actually never change. Apart from when I last saw you for lunch and you showed me a photograph of you.
When I was fat.
When you were fat.
Nobody believes me when I was
Well,
fat. I have to show that to people because if I go, they go, "Oh, why are you worried about what you eat?" I don't worry about what I eat. I don't like eat.
I know. I couldn't believe it.
So why? Well, so you can't get fat. And I go, everybody says that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when I'm put on weight, I look like a fat, thin person as well, which I'm not. You know what I mean? Like a fat, skinny fat, like just here and here.
That was amazing.
That's 20. That was my sister's 40th birthday, so it's 26 years ago.
Yeah. I think it was an unfortunate angle the camera was at as well, probably.
Yeah, but it's a good. When you want the before picture, you want it to be as bad. There's only one copy that only exists. Oh, I've got one. I've never sent it to anybody.
Nobody's getting it.
Nobody's getting that picture, no.
All right. Steve, thank you.
Brilliant.
Really appreciate it. I thought it was fantastic.
Good, I'm glad you did. Yeah, excellent.
Whether you're leading on the pitch, in the boardroom, or in public service, there's something in Steve's philosophy for everyone, striving to be their best. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with more conversations that go beyond the headlines and into the heart of high performance. This podcast is brought to you by Rosenblatt Law and is produced by Studio at Sec Newgate, UK.